of March 11th, 2025. If you could take just a moment to silence your cell phones. Also, if you want to sign up to speak tonight, please step out into the hall and let the person know at the desk outside that door that you would like to speak, and they'll enter your name and it will populate on the screen in front of us. If you could, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It's on the drive. Unless it's not March 11th. Okay. We have two proclamations this evening, and the first is Transit Staff Appreciation Day. It's always Transit Staff Appreciation Day, but today especially, and Councilwoman Kim Roney is going to deliver this proclamation. I have here that we have Keith Sanders with us. Please come forward, Mr. Sanders, and anyone else who is associated with this proclamation, please feel free to come forward at this time.
Check, check. Here we are. As a transit rider for this past 17 years, it means a lot to me to read this proclamation. Whereas National Transit Employee Appreciation Day was established in 2009 to recognize the efforts of transit workers across the United States. And whereas public transit is an essential service that connects our community, providing residents with safe, reliable, and accessible transportation. And whereas when Tropical Storm Helene hit, Asheville Rides Transit became a vital lifeline for our city in crisis. And whereas ART's operators and staff played a heroic role in the rescue efforts, transporting over 500 people to safety, working in coordination with first responders in areas such as Biltmore Village. And whereas in the aftermath of the storm, ART adapted its services to meet the city's evolving needs, deploying drivers to deliver water and supplies to vulnerable neighborhoods, implementing a flag stop system to accommodate displaced riders, and ensuring residents in shelters could access FEMA resource centers and comfort care stations. And whereas it takes a team of bus drivers, maintenance staff, road supervisors, dispatchers, and management, and professional staff to keep this vital service available to our community. And whereas transit employees work hard each day to help transit users access jobs, healthcare, school, community services, and many other personal, social, and civic opportunities. And whereas the dedication, courage, and unwavering service of Asheville's transit staff during Tropical Storm Helene exemplify their indispensable role in emergency response, recovery, and the city's overall resilience. Now, therefore, Esther Manheimer, Mayor of the City of Asheville, has proclaimed March 18th as National Transit Employee Appreciation Day in the City of Asheville, and urges the residents to recognize and celebrate the incredible contributions of our transit professionals who serve our community with dedication and care, not only in times of crisis, but every day.
Madam Mayor, and to the City Council, the City of Asheville, my peers that work with the city, we want to say thank you for recognizing the work that me and the frontline personnel do every single day. As I tell them every single day, they can do my job, but it's absolutely impossible for me to do theirs. And I really appreciate them, and I'm glad they were able to join me. I appreciate the diversity of the team, because I firmly believe that the staff that we employ should reflect the diversity of the community that we serve. So I'm extremely happy, and we are all grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm introducing to my immediate right, Stephen Sprague, who is our ATU Local 128 President. Mr. Anthony Pranger, who is the ATU Financial Secretary. last but not least, and representing the other operators in this piers, we have Mr. Jeremy Bowie, bus operator.
Thank you very much.
Did you want to say a word for the AT 128?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. You guys, it was important to me to let everybody know here that I think a lot of us reacted to the storm out of instinct and courage. It wasn't necessarily because it was our job, but because it was our job as a community member. And I saw that reflected in all the people that I worked with, everybody who showed up, and we stayed in close contact with Keith and our team. I'm just glad we came through, honestly. I'm honestly just glad that we all seem to make it. We've really done well in the recovery efforts. So it's just me saying thank you for being recognized. We didn't do it for the recognition. We did it for us.
Thank you.
Good job.
All right, thank you very much. And the second proclamation we have this evening is Red Cross Month, and Jerry Goldberg is here, former city employee, now Red Cross director, and Councilwoman Maggie Ullman, who is doing this because she's also wearing red, which is
It was on
important.
purpose, very much.
Yeah.
We really do have a whole outfit vibe right now. We got a hope shirt, I'm down with that too. All right, whereas the American Red Cross, a humanitarian organization that eases people's suffering during life's emergencies in Asheville, across the United States and the world, and whereas the American Red Cross chapter serving Western North Carolina has a long history of helping our neighbors in need by delivering shelter, care, and hope during disasters. Making our community safer through its life-saving home fire campaign, providing life-saving blood, teaching skills that save lives, and supporting military members, veterans, and their families. And whereas we thank and honor the selfless volunteers, dedicated employees, and generous supporters who make the compassionate work possible. Whereas in the first 3 months following the devastation of Helene, the American Red Cross and our partners provided, more than 3.3 million meals and snacks, nearly 56,500 overnight shelter stays, and reached an estimated 464,200 people, so almost 500,000 people. Wow, with disaster relief and recovery services, the vast majority of which were in North Carolina. And whereas last fiscal year in Western North Carolina, 186 active volunteers assisted 549 people affected by 194 local disasters, most home fires, trained 8,647 people in first aid, CPR, and AED, swimming and preparedness, collected 24,675 units of blood, and provided 520 emergency services to military members, veterans, and their families. And whereas people in our community depend on the Red Cross, whose life-saving mission is powered by the devotion of volunteers, generosity of donors, and partnership of community organizations. Now, therefore, our Mayor, Esther Mannheimer, proclaims March 2025 Red Cross Month. Oh, my God.
Yep, would someone like to say a few words? Please.
I'd like to introduce first Margarita Gonzalez, one of our board members for the Western North Carolina chapter, which serves the 16 westernmost counties, and May Mims, who is our Community Disaster Program Manager. So she oversees all of the volunteers who respond to all of the local disasters, as well as oversaw some of our community partnerships during Hurricane Helene. So both of them worked tirelessly for us. But I just want to thank the mayor, vice mayor, and council members for this recognition, and to share with our community. We know that if nothing else, Helene has showed us that it takes all of us. And while the Red Cross is here day after day and has been here in Asheville in particular for 113 years, and we're not going anywhere, we rely on volunteers. So I'm asking you to dig deep, and if Red Cross is not for you, there are so many other worthy organizations, but it takes us all coming together, especially during times. But we shouldn't wait for that. Let's prepare now. Let's educate ourselves now. Let's train now so that we are prepared to work and help each other in the future. So I thank you for this recognition.
Thank you. All right. People who were here for proclamations, do not feel that you have to stay all night, but you're welcome to, of course. Now I'm going to move on to the consent agenda. Staff, do you have questions, comments, or a motion to adopt the consent agenda, which is very long and will continue to be very long as we move through recovery?
I move to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We do not have anyone signed up to speak under the consent agenda, so all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we've adopted the consent agenda. Moving on to presentations and reports, we have the manager's report. I'm going to turn it over to the city manager, Deborah Campbell.
Thank you, Mayor. Hello, people that are visiting us. And we are going to quickly provide you with an update on a tool that has, I guess, evolved as a result of Helene. We've heard a lot about Tropical Storm Helene with the earlier proclamations. So Dawa Hitch, our Director of Communication and Public Engagement, is going to give you a quick overview. And essentially, again, this is a tool for our community to stay engaged, to stay informed about recovery efforts. And I will now turn it over to Dawa.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell, and good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. It's my pleasure to give an overview of our new AshevilleRecovers.org website. Again, my name is Dawa Hitch, and I serve as the Communication and Public Engagement Director for the city. And this work, before I jump in, is the product of a really amazing collaborative effort between our Communication and Public Engagement Department as well as our Information Technology Services Department. So I would just like to acknowledge the hard work of Christy Edwards, Rick Barley, and Cameron Henshaw, all who were able to build this site with the support of our team, our respective teams, in 6 weeks. And if you know anything about building websites, that is quite a quick turnaround to produce something that we think looks as good as and functions as well as this one does. A few key takeaways. So here's what's behind AshevilleRecovers.org. It's intended to be a one-stop shop, and it was designed to ease the navigation through the many channels that are feeding into our city's ongoing recovery efforts. It's got a user-focused design, so many of the features that you're seeing were inspired by feedback that city staff received through the Helene Recovery Engagement Hub. And it's built to evolve and adapt, recognizing that as our community continues to evolve and adapt to our new reality, we want the website to be able to do that as well and reach people in a meaningful way. So if you haven't been there, I encourage all who are watching to visit. It's AshevilleRecovers.org. You can see here that there are a number of different ways to navigate through the site. You've got opportunities to connect with what deadlines are coming up. And the important piece I want to note there is it's not just City of Asheville deadlines. One of the things that we heard was it would be helpful to have a centralized place to access information, and that there's information coming from so many different places, it's hard to kind of sift through what might be most impactful for an individual. So we've got that, we've given a nod to that through our highlighted pages. Folks can sign up for updates on the site. You can ask questions, and we'll continue to evolve the site and create communications based off of the questions that we're seeing. You can also find progress updates. So a few sections of the websites that's designed for that is the maps and data page. You can see in the bottom right of this slide an example of one of the dashboards that we have on the site. That's our storm debris meter, so we can see progress as time goes by. We've also got recent news. It's on the front page. If you scroll a little bit, you can see that, and that's got stories that are related specifically to Helene Recovery. And then we've got our recovery focus area pages. So you can see there at the top bar in this slide on the top right that there's a drop down for the focus areas, and that's where you'll see information about you can access information about storm debris or economic recovery, housing, some of those topics that continue to be at the front of the community's mind, and certainly are reflected in council's focus areas that you all just identified here at your council retreat. You can also find meetings, events, and deadlines. Again, those are not just city events, but other events that we're aware of. And an important piece to know is that we know that we can't manage all of the ever-changing information. So a lot of the links on the website will go to the original content. So if it's a meeting that's up there, it will likely take you to another site. So if there's a change in time, we don't have misinformation on our site. And again, yes, it includes information or meetings hosted by both the City of Asheville as well as our community partners. In the opportunities section, you'll find information about different grants that are available, different engagement opportunities that are happening here soon or have happened. You'll find there a link to our engagement hub, which still exists and is being redesigned to tell the story of how engagement has informed the decisions the City of Asheville has been making along the way of our recovery route. You've also got volunteering and then small business assistance, easy access points through that opportunities section. There's resources. That was another thing that we heard from the community that would be helpful, and so we've got that organized in what we hope is an intuitive way. And then back to that user-focused design. So again, some of those themes that we saw through the engagement hub were that there's a desire for easier access to information, there's confusion about deadlines, progress updates are something that are very important to our community, and so we've tried to give a nod to that. The availability of existing programs, and then again, that communication overwhelm due to multiple communication sources. So since we launched the site on February 19th, there have been 2,484 people who have visited the site, and the most visited pages on the site are our storm debris page. That one's held that spot for a long time, but then here in the last week, CDBG-DR took first place. So that's good news to us. That's telling us that people are aware that the draft action plan, for example, has been released, and they're going there to check it out and then providing input through the methods that are available on that page. So again, it's built to evolve and adapt. The white arrows on this page point to a few different places. First, to an envelope in the upper right-hand corner, and then to a bar where you can sign up for updates and then ask a question. So it's through those means that you can give us feedback and know that we're reading that input and it's informing how we're continuing to add to the page. And then I would just encourage everybody to sign up for updates. You'll get weekly updates about all of our efforts across all of the focus areas. And then you've also got the opportunity, if you're really interested in just one focus area, to sign up for a newsletter where anytime there's significant actions taken, for example, in economic recovery, then there's that opportunity to get that information directed to your inbox. So again, the AshevilleRecovers.org, it was designed to be a one-stop shop. It's got a user-focused design, and it's built to evolve and adapt, and we welcome any feedback that the community has about the site. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions, but that concludes my report.
So thank you, Dawa and staff. We greatly appreciate this. We hope, again, that the community will utilize this tool to provide them with access and information about our Helene recovery storm efforts. And with that, Mayor, if there are no further questions, that concludes my manager report for today.
Okay, I like the logo. Whoever did that, good work.
Dan the mayor.
Wow, Dan does everything.
He does
Wow.
everything. He really
Okay,
does.
that's impressive. All right, well, thank you all very much for that.
Thank you.
And thank you for such a short manager's report.
I'm getting better. I'm getting
I like
better.
her reports.
Well, I do too. Past 60 minutes, though, I'm a little. Okay, we have several public hearings. Maggie, why have you renumbered them? Are we going in a different order? Or should I be calling them in this order? Okay, all right, I'm just, the order is apparently a little different than, okay, so I have on here that we're starting with a public hearing previously held, vote to consider an amendment, so this would be Council B, this would be the B on your thing. Is that right? Okay, you didn't, well, it doesn't matter, Chris is doing all of them. So Chris, Chris, you tell us what order you want to go in. So I have on here that we're going to start with an amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance to revise the cottage development standards, and then we would do the flag lots. Yes, that's okay. That was what you're expecting. Excellent.
All right. Good evening, Madam Mayor, Council. I am Chris Collins, the Assistant Director of the city's Planning and Urban Design Department. We have been talking about these for a while, but just to refresh you, these are the two resident-led petitions to change the city's standards for flag lots and cottage developments within the city. So these are both UDO amendments. What I've got for you is not a fully fleshed out huge presentation on these. I've just got a couple of slides to refresh you on where these stand with staff recommendations and the content of each. And then I understand there are some maps that council may want to look at for consideration, so I'm going to present those to you as well. All right, so that said, first off, talking about the proposed flag lot standards. Those numbers are in front of you right now. The important thing to note on this is that the staff and resident petitioner are now aligned on the technical standards of this, and we have been for some time after a lot of extensive work back and forth and some engagement the petitioner did with the community in trying to amend these standards a bit. We are not recommending any technical changes to this. What you see as current proposal up there is what staff would recommend if we were recommending approval of the amendment right now, which our recommendation remains denial, as we have been given direction to work on corridors first and not make residential changes until we understand anti-displacement standards and possibly have an overlay in place. So that remains the staff recommendation on those for now. Moving forward and taking a look at proposed cottage development standards. We've come a long way on this as well. Staff and the resident petitioner only differ on the recommended minimum number of units to be eligible for cottage development standards. That's important because when you move into cottage development standards, you're no longer bound by density limitations of the district. So it's really a benefit to be able to use these standards. So that's why there's a minimum number of units to be able to do it. And the resident petition is for a minimum of 2 units to qualify as a cottage. For several reasons, really. Our missing middle housing study, which after all this time I can say right, that's great, does recommend that cottage developments start at 3 units. The whole concept behind a cottage development involves things like a community green, kind of its own little community that are just very hard to achieve with 2 units. And then also staff feels a much more direct way of allowing 2 units on a single family zoned lot would be to change that base allowance in single family zoning. Because really, when you get into a 2-unit cottage, you're allowing 2 units on a RS8 lot, which is kind of a duplex, whether it's detached or attached. So if that was desired, staff would recommend that would be better achieved going through a change to the land use table. So based on that difference right now, and again, because this is affecting residential zoning districts and we haven't gotten through corridors or gotten into those anti-displacement measures and overlays, staff's recommendation is still denial on that one. Now moving forward, I'm going to show you 3 maps tonight. Map 1 shows the legacy neighborhood boundaries. So this is one area that you might want to consider when looking at how these may be implemented. These are as those neighborhood boundaries are registered with the city. There you go. So, and they're maintained by our Neighborhood Services Division and present on the city's website. Second map, these are the areas most vulnerable to change as indicated by the data collected in the missing middle housing study. So these are the areas that are supported by data to be the most vulnerable to change right now. In some instances, they line up with map 1. In some instances, they do not. So those are 2. Map 3 combines the first 2 maps you just saw. So this is both your legacy neighborhood boundaries and those areas that have been indicated to be most vulnerable to change combined on one map showing layers. All right, so I did want to provide those for discussion. We certainly can move through different maps or answer any questions, but I will take any immediate questions and then I'll step back and let the council discuss these options.
I have a question actually about the previous table and our tree canopy protection ordinance. I know that if it were 5 of the cottages, that would fall under that, but this is 2, we would, I guess, be doing 3. So is there any way to still include that in that tree canopy protection ordinance?
If this were to have a minimum of 2 units on one lot would be considered, is not considered multifamily under the tree canopy protection ordinance. That's Article 19. So that would require a change to the tree canopy protection ordinance as well. But that would bring in both 2-unit cottages and any duplexes around the city, which right now are not subject to that ordinance.
And that's why the Urban Forestry Commission recommended not approving it as proposed.
Okay, this has been, okay. I was just looking at map 3 to make sure
So map 2 is the one right from missing middle, I heard, right?
Mhm.
That's the most vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
But notably, the difference between maps 1 and 3 and 2 were that it doesn't include all legacy neighborhoods. Am I right that I heard in the agenda briefing that was because most of those neighborhoods have already seen such gentrification and?
Like why
Yeah.
the first and second don't?
Yeah. Particularly, it looks like Emma Burton Street. Can you talk to us about why those aren't on map 2?
Generally, yes. There are a lot of data points that went into that. It's been a while since the study was released, but if you remember when you first reviewed it, there are actually several maps that lead into this layer, right? So there's data that's used from demographics of a community to real estate listings, real estate market change data, property value change data, and some of these places don't score as highly in some of those characteristics as others, and rate of change is one thing. If the rate of change has slowed because a lot of property has already undergone change, then it may not appear here. If the property values are a little higher and there's not that, what's the right word? There's not that lower value that might spur a higher rate of change, they might not appear here as well.
The impact has already occurred.
Yes.
So that's why if you put the 2 maps together, you capture more of the targeted area if you're wanting to protect vulnerable neighborhoods. Yep, that was sort of rhetorical. Sorry.
Can you remind me where a member of the public that perhaps lives in one of these neighborhoods might have been able to access this map before the meeting?
We have had housing data maps and things that contain these areas on them out there for some time. And we have presented them to, I don't have the dates in my head right now, but they have been at a few of the meetings we've held pre-Helene and now. So, but there's not necessarily a freestanding link to these out there on our website or anything right now.
Or part of the attached documents to the agenda?
Right.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, council, we're not taking public comment on this, I know, because we already did it, so I don't need to open the public hearing or close it, but I do, if council has any other questions or comments, this would be a good time. If anyone has a motion.
Well, point of order, don't we have to return to the motion from last meeting?
Thank you very much. Okay. to refresh our recollection, we had a motion to reconsider the previous motion. Previous motion was we did it on both, right? We did it on both, yes. The previous motion was to deny the request, and it passed. And so now, because we're reconsidering, we have to do that motion all over again. So, okay, everybody, don't get super confused. We're gonna redo the same motion. So the motion is to deny. And if this motion fails, then we're back to neutral. We're back to nothing's happened. Does that make sense?
I think technically you need a second
We need a second.
for the old motion, right?
No, because we already voted to reconsider it.
Okay.
So it's back before us. So the motion, Brad, would you like to read or say or state the motion?
I do, and just for clarity, Mayor.
What, I wasn't clear?
Well, I think you were very clear. I'm going to add on to your clarity with hopefully some additional, to say that there are two separate motions.
Yes.
Here that both of which council voted to reconsider after denying both. So the first one that you're dealing with is the motion on the changes to the flag lots. That is item B. No, excuse me, that's cottage developments, but we talked about flag lots. So just want to make sure council knows which one of the motions we're dealing with first.
Are we doing
Cottage
flag?
developments.
No, okay.
Is item B.
Sorry, okay.
We're doing
We're doing cottages first,
cottages.
and
That's
then
correct.
flag. Okay.
So the motion, which is now up again to council, it's been reinstated, was the motion to deny this. I do think you need a second, Mayor, to proceed to determine if there's sufficient support for a vote.
So then I'll second it.
Who's the motion maker?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
oh,
reconsider.
Okay, it's not just the
I
same.
made the motion last time, so the order of things is that I would make the motion again, since the item before us is to reconsider.
No, it's
It
automatically.
brings back the same motion.
Yeah, but it brings back the same motion with the same seconder.
The second has to be made again.
Sausage.
All right, we're
It's just
gonna
reconsideration
duke
of
it
the
out, or
motion.
Robert's rules duke it
He's
out
got
after
the
this.
book.
All right, so you've made, by default, made the
Yeah.
motion, you have seconded it. Got it?
Okay,
So this is to deny. Are we clear?
yes.
If you vote yes, you want to deny the changes to cottage lots.
Which brings us to neutral.
If,
And then we can start
again,
deliberating about, okay.
okay, so all those in favor, raise your hand. And all those opposed, raise your hand. Okay, so the motion fails. Now,
We're neutral.
we're back to just discussing this item. This would be the vote to consider an amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance to revise the cottage development standards. So, we have, we have these handouts.
Mayor, we've been tweaking that just the last minute, so I've just emailed council the latest draft of both of those motions. If you reference those instead, please.
I don't have anything in my yet.
Mine
but-
came in.
Did yours? Okay.
Yeah. So before I read the motion, as we discussed during our agenda briefing on Thursday, and I said at that time that I am really interested in approving these proposals for both cottage and flag lots by allowing this in most of the neighborhood, but putting pause on the neighborhoods that are on this map 3 up here. And that would allow for more time, diligence, conversation, and quite frankly, listening from the city to the community members in those neighborhoods to hear what type of things are they interested in for displacement work? Do they have zoning ideas in mind? And just have more of a dialogue. I think that by going in this approach, we're able to take action now to ensure affordable, sustainable, and inclusive development, and not split it apart and pick one over the other and really look to do it together, where we can continue pursuing housing and everything on the map that's not gray, which we know we need, but give time, respect, and lots of space to listen to the leaders in the communities that are most vulnerable and are leaders of our legacy neighborhoods. So with that proposal, I will do one at a time, Cottage first. I move to approve the resident-led proposed wording amendments to Chapter 7 with the addition of Appendix 7F and applicability only to the parcels listed within the Asheville Code of Ordinances, and find that the proposed amendments are reasonable in the public interest and consistent with the comprehensive plan in that the request, 1, provides infill development in targeted growth areas, 2, increases the supply of affordable housing in proximity to schools and transit, and 3, promotes the development and availability of affordable and workforce housing.
I just want to be clear about something. So
Oh, I didn't read the one from the email.
Okay,
are the maps, are we freezing
yeah, that's,
for map 3?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
well, when you read the
That's-
right motion.
What were the words?
Do over on the motion.
The whole thing? I guess we just do the whole thing.
It didn't get a second, go ahead.
This motion,
My bad.
Go ahead.
So this is the language. I move to approve the resident-led proposed wording amendments to Chapter 7 of the Asheville Code of Ordinances and the addition of Appendix 7F, other parcels, and applicability of the new regulations only to the parcels listed within the new appendix, and find that the proposed amendments are reasonable in the public interest and consistent with a comprehensive plan in that the request, 1, provides infill development in targeted growth areas, 2, increases the supply of affordable housing in proximity to schools and transit, and 3, promotes the development and availability of affordable and workforce housing.
So just to be clear about something, in the new one you sent, it says to the parcels not listed within.
Yes,
The
so,
first one had.
thank you, Councilmember Hess. So Appendix 7F essentially is a list of all of the parcels that you see in that map up there.
Okay.
So what the ordinance is saying is that the changes apply to every parcel not listed
Okay.
in those maps. But in order to break it down specifically for our ordinance, we have to list each and every parcel. So all of those parcels that you see in the mapped area
In the gray.
are those areas to be excluded from these changes. Their zoning remains exactly the same, and those are what is being titled other parcels.
I'll
Okay.
second the motion.
So we're protecting those
Now we
legacy
can discuss.
neighborhoods.
Yeah, I made a second, so we can enter discussion.
And then we'll have staff work with them on a more complete kind of overlay based on what they're saying beyond these zoning.
I'm kind of understanding it
Changes,
as
is that-
possibly, that we want to hear from what those community members and areas, neighborhoods want the process to look like. So I
Okay.
don't know that we're, by doing this, that we're saying we'll do that, but it's possible, right?
Okay.
Is that, am I interpreting that correctly? Because we're really looking for input from them before we decide what
But this
could
seems like a
happen.
reasonable compromise to move forward with housing, protect the legacy neighborhoods, and then come back and do the beyond zoning things that they may ask for. Okay, just making sure I have my ducks in a row here.
Yeah.
I have a technical question. Are these types of use eligible in R2 zoning? We're clarifying.
Sure, so you'll really only see the impact of cottages in RS8 zoning. In fact, they're not applicable in RS2. So really, you're looking at RS8 zoning for the cottages, because once we eclipse that and move into RM zoning, it's multifamily. So cottages don't get used there. And for the flag lots, that would be all residential zoning districts. In fact, in some cases, even non-residential zoning districts.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I'm sort of dreading, we got to do this one more time. But, okay, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All those opposed to the motion, please raise your hand. Okay, the motion carries. Okay, now we got to, that was cottages. Now we got to do flag lots. So we have Councilwoman Roney making the motion, and would you like Vice Mayor to second it once again? Second, this is to deny. So. Even I'm like, have to remember what influence to. Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, and now we're back to neutral. Do we have a motion on flag lots that Brad sent you in your email?
I move to approve the resident-led proposed wording amendments to Chapter 7 of the Asheville Code of Ordinances with the addition of Appendix F, 7-F other parcels and applicability of the new regulations only to the parcels not listed within the new appendix, and find that the proposed amendments are reasonable in the public interest and consistent with a comprehensive plan, in that the request, 1, provides infill development in targeted growth areas, 2, increases the supply of affordable housing in proximity to schools and transit, and 3, promotes the development and availability of affordable and workforce housing.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Once again, a clarifying question, are these types of uses allowed in RS2 or residential 2 zoning?
For the flag lots, yes.
Okay, ready? We're going to vote on it. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, the motion carries. Okay, thank you. We did the last 2 items on the public hearing agenda. Now moving back to the top of the public hearing agenda, we have a public hearing to consider amendments to Chapter 7 of the Code of Ordinances 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to hear a presentation on all of them, and they each require, right, blessedly, a separate vote. Correct? Yes. Okay. Yes. All right. Yes, yes. 1 public hearing, 3 separate votes, yes.
All right, good afternoon again. I'm still Chris Collins, the city's Planning and Urban Design Department. And as stated, I'm going to take you through a quick presentation on 3 proposed amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance to promote housing on transit supportive corridors and within mixed-use zoning districts. Key takeaways of what we're going to talk about here is that these amendments would impact commercial property along transit supportive corridors by increasing development review thresholds, reducing the minimum amount of parking spaces the development must provide, removing building size and density limitations in certain districts along these corridors to incentivize more residential. We are all aware there has been a demonstrated need for additional housing in the city of Asheville. And that these amendments would reduce regulatory barriers for the production of housing. And these amendments are closely supported by and supportive of the goals and strategies of the comprehensive plan and the recently completed affordable housing plan as well. So specifically, we're going to look at 3 separate amendments tonight. The first of those, again, development review level thresholds, minimum parking requirements, and zoning district-specific standards aimed at making sites more flexible for residential development. Applicable areas, due to our city shape and having different applicable areas, this ended up being the best way to demonstrate this, even though I know it's not perfect. But what you'll see here is colors along our corridors. There are 3 different applicable areas for threshold amendments, parking amendments, and site standards. For a couple of reasons, thresholds and parking differ because of some analysis we did post-Helene regarding special flood hazard areas. Those have been removed from the threshold amendment, but they remain in the parking amendment where less impervious surface is not necessarily a bad thing. And as far as the site-specific standards, those only go into zoning districts where those tweaks were needed. So that's why you see a little bit of a different thing there. Each one of these is applicable to our base zoning districts. We're not creating new districts or any kind of like new zoning or anything like that. They are tweaks to those zoning districts that exist in those areas. Okay, so talking about development review thresholds. Just to kind of the high level, there's a lot going on in this amendment, but the high level of what's happening here is a move to measuring residential projects except single-family detached homes and gross square footage instead of by dwelling unit count. And one advantage there is that would allow someone to get more smaller units in their by right amount and not counted on an individual unit. And smaller units can be more naturally occurring, attainable, or affordably priced housing. There's a proposal to raise the threshold for level 3 conditional zoning projects from everything over 49 units, which is what it is now. Everything over 49 units gets reviewed by this council right now, to 100,000 square feet for all residential projects, bringing it in line with non-residential projects in the city. And allowing for further incentives based on affordable housing incentives as well. The third bullet are some smaller changes. They are important. We're not going to go into too much detail on these, but there is a proposal in this amendment to raise or eliminate specific triggers for level 1 site plan review. These are small commercial projects, very small residential projects that involve site design standards and construction of new sidewalks for the occupation of existing structures.
So, to be clear, if a business moved from the River Arts District and then they wanted to relocate into a building that was no longer being used, they wouldn't have to invest in anything. They could just move in without triggering those thresholds.
Correct,
Those
without
reviews.
those zoning site improvement thresholds. And
Awesome.
just to touch on it real quick for y'all, we have two things in the ordinance now that trigger those. One of those is when a site or property is vacant for essentially over 180 days. The next user who comes in has to bring it up into compliance with all of our ordinances. That's a barrier to occupying those places. The other one is what we call an increase in land use impact. So that's where our land use table says something is a low, medium, or high impact land use. If a doctor's office was there and a restaurant came in, for instance, they would have to bring the whole site into compliance, which is difficult sometimes with sites that are already paved and parked and things like that.
This is
So-
actually a literal example from Post to Lean too, because I was contacted by businesses trying to relocate and architects trying to meet the new needs, and it's a good solution. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for including this in there. I think this is a leg up for our small businesses.
Sure, we've seen a lot of support for this out there, so great. All right, moving on, now we're going to focus on those level 3 conditional zoning thresholds that are part of the proposed ordinance right now. And that's this table that's in front of you right now. If you just look at the first row labeled baseline, this is a project that doesn't propose any affordable housing. This proposal would say if this is a single-use residential project, all apartments at less than 20% mixed use, even if it had like a small restaurant in the bottom, there are qualifications to be mixed use. They would be entitled to go up to 100,000 square feet and be reviewed for technical compliance with the ordinance, rather than have to go through conditional zoning. If it was a mixed-use project, which in this case, the ordinance proposal says about 80% residential at least would have to be, then they would be able to go up to 150. Now, that would be the baseline. What you see here are the incentives for affordability. We did work with quite a few housing developers, held focus groups, and out surveys based on these tiers to see what would work and what might not work to actually incentivize affordable housing from our traditional housing developers out there, right? So that is one of the major steps we took to develop these tiers. We also worked with our Community and Economic Development Department, Affordable Housing Officer. So you'll see Tier 1 has a 5% commitment at 80% AMI that would move this up to 150,000 square feet by right, or 200,000 square feet for a mixed-use project. I won't keep going down the list, but you'll see as the affordability commitment increases, there are 50,000 square foot steps here. Now, what does that mean? One thing we did as staff is we did a kind of a look back and analysis of projects that this group has reviewed in the past to see how this would impact that. And what we found when taking into account affordability commitments is that roughly 52% of those would not have been seen by council if these amendments were in place at the time. They would have gone through a by right process and a review that would be more akin to a 60-day review instead of a 6-month review. And that was 25 residential level 3 reviews. So these are projects that were a CZ because they were over 50 units. You've seen more than 25 projects, but those are the projects that were here because they hit that trigger. And it is important to note, the interesting thing to us in tallying these back up is 21 of those 25 did include some affordable units. So it was a nice step. Digging a little bit deeper, I'll walk through a couple of examples and how these would have applied with these thresholds. The first of those is a development that went by the name of the Avery. at 363 Klingman. This was reviewed by council in around this time in 2022, right? This was 149,872 square feet, 187 residential units, and committed to 10% of its units being affordable at 80% AMI. Did not qualify as a mixed-use project because the commercial wasn't quite high enough to get there. But this one itself would have been able to be reviewed as a level 2 by right project. In fact, would have even had about 50,000 square feet to play with. They could have increased the size and been a by right review due to that 10% at AMI, 10% at 80% AMI commitment. The next one we'll look at is one that actually I think you all have seen twice. One was quite a while ago, but the most recent time for the Stoneyard development was in December of 2022. This is a big one, 306,000 square feet, 263 residential units, pledged 5% affordability at 80% AMI, very little commercial, so this would be single use on that table that we looked at. This one would have still come to City Council. This would have still required a CZ. That affordability commitment would not be enough to get it up to 306,000 being a by right, or increase its affordability or reduce the project size. A third example, another 2022 review, when we found a gold mine in 2022. It's the Julian Shoals multifamily project. They didn't give us a specific GFA, but we're confident saying it was well over 150,000 square feet, but not much. Did commit to 10% affordability at 80% area median income for 218 total units. This one, due to that 10% commitment, would have been able to increase the project by approximately 50,000 square feet and still skip council review, but would have at this point right there. So I'm hoping that kind of demonstrates how this works and where it would have played out for these projects. All right, moving on to the amendment on minimum parking requirements. So what this does, the key aspects here are that it eliminates mandatory parking minimums for most developments in select commercial districts, again, along those corridors, those transit supportive corridors. Because of that change, it changed how we have to calculate required bicycle parking. And we did push that bicycle parking ratio up a little bit while we were having to change that to support multimodal transportation options, or at least some of the infrastructure to support it. It does eliminate an ability to exceed parking maximums. We did not change parking maximums because that would have created nonconformities. And we did look through many examples, numerous examples from North Carolina and nationally to find that the vast majority of developers in places that have eliminated parking requirements are still providing parking. To take that a little more detailed, we looked at that here in Asheville, where parking is not required for residential developments within 1 mile of the central business district or downtown. That was 13 projects. Out of those 13, 8 provided the same amount or more parking than would have been required, and 5 provided a little bit less parking, but still provided parking. The last set in these amendments are what we've been calling the district-specific standards. What these really are standards that limit building size within certain districts along these transit supportive corridors. These updates focus on the potential to increase housing in these areas by increasing how large a building can be when residential uses are included, right? What this does not change is the height restrictions, requirements for building setbacks from property lines, or any property line landscape buffer requirements. In multifamily, for instance, but single-family residential, there is a 20 to 30-foot landscape buffer required in all instances. None of those things are changing or being proposed for change. It does remove specific density limits in order to allow the size of residential buildings to be controlled by building size limits rather than a number of units. When you control by number of units, you tend to dictate larger units than if you're controlling by building size. Real quickly, kind of a conceptual example of how this works right there. You'll see on this, in this instance, we're looking at the Office 2 zoning district. Currently has a max height of 40 feet and a max ground floor area or building footprint of 8,000 square feet. and also carries a max total floor area for the whole building of 16,000 square feet. You can easily see that your ground floor area, 8,000, total area at 16,000, that's 2 stories. There's no way to achieve your max height. So what we're proposing here is to allow a different maximum when there's residential involved. Does not increase the building height allowance, again, or the buffers, but allows you to go a little larger when you're building residential. So that's kind of and this graphic there shows that 16,000 in white. You could go another up if you're doing residential. Real quickly, just to show some good contextual pictures, this is what this might look like on Merriman Avenue where it's zone CB1. See in yellow, the existing 2-story building used as an example is at approximately 12,000 square feet, I believe, because that was a build under CB1 where it would have been limited. But in this instance, in pink, you can see 2 new floors of residential could go on there. All right. Again, just going over this, we just looked at amendments to development review thresholds, minimum parking requirements, and some site-specific density and building size standards that are aimed to address and assist with the demonstrated need for additional housing that we've seen in Asheville and that is detailed by numerous of plans and policies that we have here in the city. Those plans calling for the reduction of regulatory barriers and the provision of incentives for the development of affordable housing. And that ties in really nicely to the support these amendments receive from the goals and strategies of our comprehensive plan and the recently completed affordable housing plan. All right, so that was a lot with a high-level presentation. Happy to take any questions.
My first one is that the map that was brought forward in this meeting only applied to cottage clusters and flag lots. It doesn't apply to the next 3, correct?
That map was not produced for this amendment, none of those.
Well,
There's no map produced
yeah,
for
I mean,
this.
these are it's already zoned commercial, so that would be a downzoning, which we're not allowed to do right now.
I guess where the overlap is where those neighborhoods meet the corridors. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, the front door of the neighborhoods. So by skipping council review, along with reducing parking standards, there are meant to be cost savings for developers. And I'm understanding from fellow electeds across the state, like in Durham, where they're upzoning the entire city and county, that the floor for terms of affordability should be 10% of the units at 60% of the area median income. Has there been a conversation about making sure that our goals match across our documents for area median income?
Could you clarify across our documents?
Well, we have standards like our open space amendment and our Luigi. Like, we have multiple housing incentive plans and documents. I'm just surprised there's still 80% on this.
Yeah, so we based ours on our extensive feedback from housing developers, with the goal being gaining affordable units from those who might not necessarily usually develop that affordable housing. And what we found out actually in our one-on-one survey is that from the folks, 100% said they would take advantage of Tier 1, as you see here, and that number dropped drastically as you went down through it. So what we proposed was based on simply trying to gain those affordable units with these developments.
There was discussion in the formative years of this policy sausage making around it being citywide, right? We reduced it to corridors in an effort to allow neighborhoods and others to, go through a process of engagement and so on. But right now, we're just talking about corridors, and I personally would love to talk more in the future about citywide housing policy, but I can respect that we're just talking corridors right now. I do appreciate what Durham is doing, and I do think that we need housing tools across the city.
We have a questions, comments of Chris, but then we have several people signed up to speak, so we can take the public comment. Why does it say I signed up? No. Okay. Is that okay? Is that all right? Okay. Everybody, when you come to speak, you'll have 3 minutes. Just watch the lights on the lectern. Green means go, orange means you're getting close to the end, and red means stop. And the first person signed up to speak is Jeremy Cohen. And you can speak on all 3 of these items, or one of them, or however you want to do it.
Mayor, members of council, city staff. My name is Jeremy Cohen. I'm an Asheville resident, public school parent, and Montford homeowner. I'm a developer, and I have a passion for attainable infill housing. Housing is incredibly expensive to build. Costs for land, materials, and interest payments have increased more quickly than wages, and the entire system is out of balance. Renters and homeowners are struggling. Housing scarcity is a national problem, and one without easy answers or quick fixes. Our mountainous topography, limited buildable land, and growing population make Asheville's housing shortage particularly challenging to overcome. Accelerating our new housing supply is the most actionable and direct solution and the strongest tool that we have to combat displacement and soaring costs. Many of the zoning rules in place create unintentional hurdles to new housing that stifle attainability, increase risk and build cost, and push new developments outside of city limits. This has accelerated displacement of legacy residents, encouraged sprawling developments that consume landscapes, and cost the city millions of dollars in unrealized property tax revenue. If we are to align public policy with our stated goals of increasing housing supply, avoiding displacement of legacy residents, and adding new infill and missing middle housing, then the Asheville zoning code needs to be updated. If we earnestly believe that we can solve big problems, then we need to start acting now in ways both big and small. The 3 proposed updates to the zoning code will make it easier to build more attainable and affordable housing, bring fairness and certainty to a challenging approvals process, and increase the supply of buildable sites that can support housing. I would like to go through the 3 proposals one at a time. Parking standards. Existing parking requirements discourage the construction of infill housing by making it more expensive to build. Whether a surface lot or stacked parking deck, they add significant overhead costs to every project and typically require that 50 to 80% of land be allocated to parking. The result is a smaller building footprint and fewer units on each site. Because project costs must be divided between fewer units, too much of our new housing is geared for the luxury market. This policy favors parking over people and needs to change. Preservation of parking minimums is a barrier to affordability that you can tear down today.
Thank you.
May I request an additional 2 minutes to finish?
No.
But you can email it to us.
Yeah, you can email us your comments.
You have to have 3.
Sorry.
That doesn't work that way, y'all.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Matt Allen. So just a refresher, so we allow 3 minutes per speaker. However, if you're part of a group and you have 3 people that yield their time to you, you can speak for up to 10 minutes.
Good evening. Matt Allen from the Realtor Association. I work in professional development and government affairs there. Of course, I've been here before on the flag lots and cottage developments issue. We have 2,000 members. Many of those live in the city of Asheville, and the majority of them work in the city of Asheville. And I'm here tonight to speak in support of these proposals. Last time I was here on the flag lots and cottage developments issue, I mentioned that our state association and the home builders and the chamber had recently passed a housing gap study. Across the state, 765,000 units are needed in the next 5 years. Now that the report is out, we have county-specific data, and it probably won't surprise you that Buncombe is one of 7 counties where both the rental and the for-sale housing gap is critical. We need almost 7,500 rental units over the next 5 years to meet our needs, and over 12,000 housing units to meet our needs. The only way we're going to make a dent in that gap, of course, is to make changes like flag lots, cottage developments, thank you, and also these proposals. There's no one perfect solution to this. We can keep chipping away. As we see rising construction costs, as we see a lack of workers, we really need to get creative and pass any and all text amendments to allow for the development of more housing. So in closing, on behalf of our members at LOTSAR, I ask that you vote yes on all the proposed changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Star Silvas.
Thank you for letting me speak. I'm a professional engineer. I was on the Flood Damage Reduction Task Force after 2004.
Could you pull the mic closer?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Thank you so much.
Sure. So I'm a professional engineer. I'm not a developer. I'm a subject matter expert in stormwater hydrology, flood damage. I was on the Flood Damage Reduction Task Force. I think that reducing parking is great. I do not agree with increasing the threshold for level 3. I think we really need to be careful. I think that some of the proposals for the level 3 thresholds is not protecting our neighborhoods. It's not looking at particularly the requirement that if we change something, we can't change it back if it doesn't work. It looks as though we will be reducing affordability and providing more housing with less affordability, and we can't change it back. We need to be protecting our neighborhoods. We need to be looking at a public benefits table for any changes to the UDO before we make them, since we cannot change them back. We also need to do a displacement risk assessment. If we are not including affordability as much as we were before, then we are basically contributing to homelessness and lack of housing for people in Asheville if we increase those thresholds. I think council needs to be really careful about the order of operations and look very carefully at all of those impacts, including the public benefits, flood increasing, as well as displacement risk, and making sure that everything that we do goes through due diligence before we make changes to the UDO, since we cannot change it back. We also need to be looking at our living comprehensive plan and making sure that what we're doing is in accordance with the values that we put in there, including tree canopy preservation, renewable energy affordability, and flood reduction. Many of the areas that they showed earlier were vulnerable areas for neighborhoods, were part of what would be changed here, and we haven't done enough looking at how that will affect those vulnerable neighborhoods. We shouldn't give away our negotiation tools that can improve development projects and improve affordability. And I really think that we need to be looking at our order of operations and looking at public benefits prior to making any changes to the UDO.
Okay, we're just full of awful rules, and one of them is no clapping. So if you, I know, it's been that way for many, many, many years. So if you like what the speaker said, give us a hands up. If you don't like what the speaker said, you can give us a thumbs down. But I know we're not.
It's not as satisfying.
Not as satisfying, right, it's not as satisfying. Susan Bean is our next speaker.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of council. I'm Susan Bean. I'm the Housing and Transportation Director for Mountain True, and I lead our Neighbors for More Neighbors WNC program. The cost of housing in Asheville is too high. There's a well-documented housing shortage nationwide, and we are no exception. Not having enough homes means people compete for the few that are available, and that drives prices higher. Just since Helene, 2 of my friends who are renting in the city have moved out of state because they couldn't afford to stay here. And I expect that evictions will keep going up since we know many people were not able to work for weeks or months after the storm. One thing that would help our affordability crisis would be to have more housing options in places that allow people to ride the bus or walk, which decreases overall household expenses. When Buncombe County is building multifamily housing relative to the city at a rate of 19-1, we are forcing people to live further away from things like jobs and schools. We need more housing choices within our city. In addition to supporting these proposals as a way to create more housing choices in our city, we do also support protections for our community's legacy neighborhoods. I was excited to learn that there have been productive conversations between legacy neighborhood representatives and city staff recently, and I hope that time will be allowed for those conversations to continue in order to influence future proposed changes to our rules about what homes can be built and where. I ask that you support the proposals before you tonight while honoring as best as possible the requests of the legacy neighborhoods, again, as a way to allow for more housing options in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent, excellent, very good. Dylan McBride Wood. And Jeremy Cohen, good job. You got some folks. We've got you there at the end.
Mayor, Council, thank you again for taking the time to hear from the community, and thank you for the 2 things you just passed. Very excited about that. I want to express my support for all 3 of these, and it's because I've talked to you about this before. The current UDO is completely broken, right? How do you know it's broken? Look at the boundary of the city of Asheville, and then look right on the other side of it, almost anywhere, and what do you see? You see a giant apartment complex or a giant subdivision. And we're driving this development further and further outside of the city. As other folks have said, we're losing tax revenue. We're forcing people to live further from transit, further from parks, further from grocery stores, and we're losing the ability as a city to have this dense city center. That's the whole point. We're having a donut effect where we build all of these housing units far away. Everyone has to get on the highway, commute into downtown where we all work. It causes more traffic, more emissions. And so I think all of these amendments will promote infill development. We don't have to build more roads. We don't have to pay to maintain more roads. We can just build more housing where we already have infrastructure. So, and then just really quickly on the thresholds, I want to reiterate for everyone. It's, we talk about, are we increasing the threshold? What we're doing is we're changing how we count it. That's my understanding, right? It's no longer based on the number of units. It's based on square footage. Because when we base it on the number of units, we are incentivizing developers to build bigger units because they can stay under the threshold. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind here. But anyhow, I just wanted to express my support. Thanks for taking the time. Yeah.
Well said, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Eva Snyder. That was quick. It was on. It was on.
It's not the same guy.
He was on there, and then he withdrew it.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I grew up in Asheville. I went through 2nd grade through 12th grade in Asheville City Schools. I moved back to town after college with my now husband in 2017. And now we have a daughter, and we live about half a mile from where my parents are. But we can't afford to buy a house because cost of living in that neighborhood has gone dramatically up from where it could be afforded to be bought into by the family with 3 kids and 1 tradesperson's income to where 2 people making a professional income can't afford to buy a house. And so I know that it's a lot worse for a lot of other people. Relatively, my husband and I have a lot of privilege living in this city. And we've made living close to downtown and having only 1 car a real priority. And we've, made sacrifices to make that happen. We don't want to move outside of the city. We don't want to be commuting with most of our time. So I really just wanted to try and focus, which is not my strong suit, on a couple of things that I really appreciate about what the city staff have done in their work on these amendments. And the first thing I want to call out is the same thing the last speaker did, which is just that changing our regulations from looking at the number of units in a project to looking at the volume of the building being constructed allows us to control for the shape of buildings that we want to have in our neighborhood areas, but to incentivize builders to build more homes in that space. Right now, when we're controlling for the quantity of units, they're going to build them as big as they can so that they can sell them for as much as they can. And what's gonna get left out is people who want a smaller home, close to town, close to amenities. And so we need to change that incentive structure. And I also think that allowing construction that includes residential buildings to build up rather than to build out, both by eliminating the parking mandates and by changing the way that we're regulating the size of those buildings, will allow more homes that people need to be built. My favorite place that I've lived in Asheville since I moved back was a second-story unit in a mixed-use building in the CB2 district in the Claxton neighborhood. And I would love to still live there, but they didn't have 2-bedroom units, so we moved to a different place when we were expecting my daughter. And I would love for more people to have the opportunity to live in a place like that. And so I hope you'll consider these amendments as a way to allow more people to live in this great city. And I really would like you to consider not requiring a table of benefits, because anything that we're doing that requires conditional review or more costs pushes smaller developers out and closes projects down.
Thank you very much. We're pausing to note yes, thank you. Andrew Paul. Yeah, we might need to adjust our aisle width. Sorry.
Hey everyone, I'm Andy. I am a lead organizer with Asheville for All. And I have a really vivid memory of the first apartment that I looked at when I came to Asheville. It was more than 10 years ago. I came to Asheville for a job. I came here because I got a job offer. The job was downtown, and I was straight out of grad school. I did not own a car. So I really needed a place in a core neighborhood or on a corridor. And the first apartment I looked at was on Blue Ridge Ave, just about a quarter mile off of Haywood Road. And as I'm turning onto Blue Ridge Ave, I had rented a car to look for apartments. Turning onto Blue Ridge Ave, I see a big apartment building under construction. This was about 2014. And if you guys know West Asheville, you know this apartment building. There's like a CBD shop on the first floor. It's just a little bit east of the library, a little bit east of Firestorm on the other side of the street. And I thought, that's the kind of place I want to live. That's the kind of building that I want to live in. When I was coming from Minneapolis, those are the kinds of places we had. But I ended up looking at a bungalow. Again, it's about a quarter mile down the road, and this place was falling apart. The ceiling was coming down in this apartment. And so I left the neighborhood. I ended up finding another apartment somewhere else, but I really wanted to live on that place, on that commercial corridor. We talk about all the housing things that we need, and we need a lot of housing, but I think we should also talk about what we want. I want all of this stuff that is being proposed today. I think we should feel good about what's being proposed. I think we should celebrate it. We talk about some of these amendments like they're a burden, like they're something we have to mitigate, but these are things we should celebrate. They're gonna make our city more fun, more walkable. I'm not the same person I was in 2014. I have 2 kids. I'm a little bit older. I still want to live in a place where I can walk out the door and step out onto a 10-foot sidewalk that will take me anywhere. That is magic. Infill housing is a community benefit. Infill housing is a community benefit, and any improvements we can make to get there are improvements. We talk about the UDO like it's this puzzle box that it's going to take forever to solve. Any improvement is an improvement, and we've already made improvements tonight. We're going to keep making improvements, and we need to improve missing middle. We need to get Luigi back. We need to improve that, but anything we can do is an improvement, and I thank you all.
Thank you. Spencer Cargus.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Spencer Cargus. I live in East Asheville. I'm here as a volunteer with Asheville for All to support these amendments to our zoning codes. When this council approved the missing middle study in 2022, our housing supply was already severely lacking, as it was nationally. Here we are 3 years later, and while I commend the effort that this council and zoning board has put forth for these initiatives, I have to say that as your constituent, I'm frustrated by the pace of these changes. The amendments we have before us are modest. They are just a step. Over time, they will lead to more housing, denser housing, and housing that is accessible to public transit. Everyone benefits from these things, not just the folks who end up living there, but the workers who have shorter commutes, the families who have safer neighborhoods, every single resident that breathes our air and walks our streets, and importantly, any existing residents vulnerable to displacement. That type of housing is a community benefit. It seems like this council rightly cares about this issue, and I see your good intentions at every turn. But impact matters more than intent. So I'm asking you, on behalf of the people currently getting priced out of living here, to please move swiftly and vote yes on the proposed amendments. There is a cost to inaction and delay, and it is being borne by our residents through increased costs and greater displacement. Housing delayed is housing denied. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks who are standing up, we do have some seats available if you want to sit down. Yeah, because the firefighters are going to kick you out of that back corner. There you go. God, thank you. Marty Benson.
Hello, friends. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm Marty Benson. I'm an attorney in town and do a lot of volunteer work with Strong Towns and Asheville for All. I am here to express enthusiastic and blanket support for these UDO amendments because in August of 2024, if you asked anybody what Asheville needed more than anything else, most people would answer in their top few answers, housing. We had a huge housing crisis in August of 2024, and then Helene hit. I think that our persistent housing crisis has a lot to do with our history of exclusionary zoning, which leads to inequitable, non-resilient, non-accessible, and non-sustainable outcomes. That's a public detriment. These amendments will result in smaller units, more smaller units in the same size of building, more mixed-use development, less car dependence, more accessibility, more resilience. That's a public benefit. And like Councilwoman Turner said earlier, I'm unsatisfied with these amendments. I'm gonna be back here in the future to fight for more. But just because they're not perfect and they don't do everything that I want, for example, I live at the corner of Indiana and Michigan, and I want these 3,000 square foot monolithic houses that are going up in my neighborhood to also be allowed to alternatively have studio apartments in them so that the workforce who works along Haywood can walk to work. So I'll be asking for that in the future. But just because this isn't included in that doesn't mean that I'm going to allow imperfection be the enemy of good progress. So I would like to see the housing and mixed-use development and sustainability and resilience that these amendments would likely result in. One thing that I do want to add, affordability, big A affordability is awesome. Attainability is going to be achieved by these amendments in a way that big A affordability may not be. And it's also really important to remember that without public subsidy, the money that you spend on a conditional zoning permit and the money that you spend on hitting big A affordability as a developer is always passed on to the tenants in one way or another. So the average rent doesn't go down when you require 60 or 80% AMI affordability. Thanks.
Thank you. Scott Adams.
Hello, can you hear me? I just have to crane over. I'm here wearing two hats. I'm representing Asheville for All, and I'm also representing Compact Cottages. We're a local home builder. I work as a land developer for that company. And I'll just add, first off, just a quick request to approve these three zoning text amendments. I encourage you to discuss them, but ultimately approve them. And I'll just add on a quick sort of add on to that. Chris Collins' presentation earlier mentioned the topic of landscape buffer or landscape standards and buffer standards. Those definitely come into play both on commercial corridors and also on residential properties, particularly on small, weird, irregular urban sites that are adjacent to other commercial properties, adjacent to residential neighborhoods, and particularly if you're trying to do residential on commercial zone properties, you can often run into limitations, particularly with property line buffers. So it's just a quick request and a reminder that that's a good follow-on item. But otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you. Danielle Arostaki.
Hi, City Council. Good evening. My name is Danielle Rossi. I live in East Asheville, not too far from Tunnel Road. I'm here tonight to speak in favor of all three of the amendments, but particularly the amendment to eliminate parking minimums in commercial corridors. As we all know, Asheville is in need of more affordable housing. Eliminating parking minimums provides needed flexibility to developers so that they can prioritize people over parking. Thousands of cities in the U.S. have already acted to reduce or eliminate parking minimums, and numerous studies have shown that these measures lead to more housing being built. By focusing first in commercial and transit corridors, this measure will encourage that the development of this housing takes place in the places in the city that can best absorb that housing and are equipped to handle that growth. Densifying our commercial corridors will be necessary if we want to improve walkability and public transit in the city. These are all changes I'd really like to see personally on Tunnel Road, which is near where I live. And so in short, I think that this is a thoughtful, iterative approach that meets Asheville's goals for affordability and sustainability, and I hope that you vote in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken Brame.
Thank you guys for dealing with this. I know it's a touchy issue, and you guys have spent a lot of time trying to figure out the right approach, and staff has spent a lot of time. But again, I'm a volunteer with the Western North Carolina Sierra Club, and I will tell you, every time I'm out in Candler or Arden or Fletcher or any of those places, I see clear-cut forest going down for lower density housing and apartment complexes going in, and I know that every one of those that go in means more pollution, more carbon being burned, more traffic congestion coming into our city. The solution to that is infill development and doing something in the city of Asheville. And I'll tell you, even more depressing is coming back into our major corridors and not seeing mixed-use developments, not seeing more strip centers, vacant land waiting for the next strip center to go in, when that could become a mixed-use development, or even better, an apartment complex where people have access to bus routes and can come in. You know, we look around, what we're doing today is not working. I wish it did, we could just stay with the status quo, but it's not working. We've got to try something different. I don't know if this is a perfect solution, but I know that cities across North Carolina and around the country are doing exactly what is being proposed here. So I would encourage you to step out. We need to do something. We can't wait. We've got to do something to help with the housing crisis, because it only got even worse when it happened with Helene. And so I'm asking you to please consider doing something to help with this problem. And this is the best solution that I've seen come forward. And we can't afford to wait another 2 or 3 years to come up with the perfect solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Watkins.
Can you all hear me? Good evening, City Council. My name is Tim Watkins. I'm a founding member of Strong Towns Asheville. And I'm speaking in support of all the UDO amendments tonight. I think we can all agree we'd like to see the following things from the city: a living wage for city staff, more sidewalks and greenways, well-maintained parks, the ability to maintain or rebuild our public pools, and increase city services such as bus frequency. We'd also like to see housing prices in our city be within reach for residents. This is what's up for vote tonight. Our current UDO does not incentivize or permit productive and efficient use of our limited land. According to census data, Asheville ranks 16th out of 20 in density for large urban areas in North Carolina. If we want to have a financially resilient city that provides stable services for residents with housing costs that are attainable, we must get serious about housing and increasing density. I understand that some of you want to see a public benefits table for developments. And I know you've heard this before, but housing is a public benefit. In a perfect world, developers would pay for these community benefits. But unfortunately, studies show that the price of inclusionary zoning is paid by the renters, not by the developers. I urge you to all consider the harm in doing nothing. Property taxes will continue to increase in order to meet our growing city budget. Housing prices will continue to increase as demand outpaces supply. We should be following the lead of other growing cities such as Austin, Denver, and Nashville that permitted a lot of housing and now have dropping rents. If you all cannot come to a yes on the amendments proposed, find a compromise. Make an abridged motion. There's nothing wrong with incremental and iterative change. By doing nothing, you are perpetuating the problem. Continuously delaying these changes perpetuates the problem. Please be a part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Zachary Rohanna.
Good evening, Council. I wanted to make a few comments on the proposals, specifically parking minimums. Costly parking mandates directly affect housing supply and cost. More than 1,000 homes were destroyed or sustained major damages since the lien. These damages were not equitable or equal to all. They affected the poorest communities, and they affected communities even outside our own city and across the region. In order to keep service workers in Asheville, we must supply them with adequate housing that allows them to live here. This would also lower development costs and free up land for new homes. This emphasizes pro-development and economic benefits towards the city. Not only would it allow developers to build in more places, but it would allow them to build higher buildings with more units and increase walkability. These proposals are a great start to allowing infill and incremental development, but we will need to continue to work to solve these issues further. I fully support all three proposals and believe they will increase housing supply and decrease housing and rental costs. Thank you.
And Barry Bialik.
Thank you. Thank you for some bold leadership. And about tonight, you know, I wish I kind of had the Schoolhouse Rock theme going behind me to talk about how a citizen's text amendment becomes a UDO rule. But we're going to talk about these other rules right here. So first of all, we need change. The last time we did significant zoning changes to our city to increase the housing stock was 2017. I was part of your Affordable Housing Committee in 2016 when Vidilla was walking them through. And even then, at the last minute, hours before council, the meat of a lot of that got lost. Like we lost duplexes in single-family zones. We lost lot averaging. If we had had that, it probably wouldn't even need the flag lots to go through. But the point is we need change. We now have some of the highest home purchase and rent costs in the state, and we're well behind the curve, so we have a lot of catch-up to do. So any change is good because we're so far behind the curve. I also want to remind that the devil is in the details, and I think if I was writing a citizen text amendment for these three that you're going through tonight, there's certain things I would have included. We are one of Compact Cottages. We build residential homes in commercial districts. So what we're doing is when we change rules and we don't take into account the actual details of the people who are actually building them, we create rules that don't work. So example tonight, we're changing setbacks of a zoning district, but we have landscape standards that require 3 times that setback. Why? So I think it's really important that we get the input of the people who are actually doing the work, doing the building, to incorporate in this. And sometimes it means they drive it. So yeah, I'm all for citizens text amendments. It's kind of like I say, it's kind of like the AI and Wikipedia format of creating the UDO. The UDO is such a static document, that we need other ways to work on it. The other two parts I would say for this particular one tonight is that in commercial districts, we do not allow ADUs. That's something we can add on right now to fix that, because there are lots of residential homes, especially in West Asheville along Patton, that are zoned highway business that do not have the right to build a UDO. So one thing like we could add in to fix right now is allowing ADUs in commercial districts for residential uses, because we have a mix of where we have uses, residential uses allowed in commercial districts, but we have standards that then apply that don't match. So that's something I would write in on the spot text amendment for. The other thing I'll say is we need, of all of this, it's like I understand how we need to change percentages to create affordable housing, but what we need to do is hold accountable those we're funding with nonprofit funds that are supposed to be creating affordable housing. The Housing Authority is a mess.
Dang.
Was that this? Or, okay. Z. Childers.
Hey, my name is Z, and I am a local resident here at Asheville. So I noticed that a lot of people here are discussing the problems that a lot of cities in the South experience with parking minimums, because it does tend to restrict housing options and where we can choose developments to start. I was just honestly trying to bring to the attention of the council that a rail system might actually serve as a good solution to mitigate the need for parking demands. As Asheville gets bigger, it's not going to be more practical to, implement such an infrastructure project. So, yeah, that's all I wanted to bring to your attention.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The most expensive kind of transportation infrastructure.
Yep. Yes. So that concludes the public comment on this. Just on that last note, we are slated for the year, I don't know when, for a passenger rail stop under the federal program funded several years ago. So there is a task force. You can pay attention to the work they're doing, and hopefully we will one day get that stop. Council, I am closing the public hearing. Do I have questions, comments, or a motion? As Brad is making us do, we have to have 3 different motions on. I was just trying to blame you.
While
even
the
though-
sausage is being made on the dais, I will take an opportunity for a prepared comment. It's interesting that Nashville, Tennessee was brought up in public comment, because I've spoken with some of the counselors there who now speak with deep regret about who was displaced and the sprawl that unaffordable trickle-down housing strategy caused there. And they're now having to scramble to figure out how to commute workers in from out of town to keep the local businesses running. I don't get to give a grade like I would for my students. I'm limited to options of yes and no. So the way I see it, the threshold decisions tonight are just out of sequence. The transit-oriented development is widely considered the best practice, as housing close to transit means being able to get to work, to school, to the grocery store, that was named tonight, without requiring access or the expense of a car. I want to support this, but there are a couple missing steps that need to happen before we can give up the existing council negotiation tools, especially as zoning has a history of causing harm in our community, and we have an opportunity to use it to help and heal. I think an appropriate sequence means we should, 1, approve our affordable housing plan. We haven't done that yet. 2, approve the missing middle housing study and displacement risk assessment. We haven't done that yet. Number 3, bring forward a benefits table at least as good as the one we currently use to incentivize the building of hotels. I'd rather be building apartments than hotels. 4, implement the tools to protect our neighborhoods vulnerable to displacement. Then bring this back in the right order to expedite transit-oriented development our community is capable of. The risk of this passing in the shadow of Senate Bill 382 means we don't get to go back later or fix it, like adding a public benefits table with renewable energy readiness and multimodal infrastructure, commonly negotiated community benefits that we do right now in CZ. Also, at the current levels of affordability, we are knowingly leaving behind voucher holding, elder, disabled, youth, and working class neighbors. The author of Homelessness is a Housing Problem noted when he presented in Asheville that if communities don't build housing for incumbent residents, you will build housing and still have a housing problem. I think we can get back on track with the sequence that uses zoning to help and heal instead of harm, if it's a priority. Thank you for your consideration.
Anyone else?
I have a few comments, probably another 2 minutes, similar to Kim. I really want to voice my appreciation for everyone being here tonight. I think this is the first time in years I've seen so much support and input on housing. We often hear from dissenting opinions and rarely hear from, support of housing, and it's nice to see. So thank you for being here.
On that note, I'll go ahead and point out that I see a bunch of dissenters, but they were told before the meeting that they already had their four. So I think
You
that's
say
why
what?
they're.
I'm sorry, I couldn't
think
hear.
that's why they're not speaking.
I didn't quite understand what you said.
No, you mentioned that it was all pro voices, and I'm looking out on folks that I
absolutely
realize
not.
are
No.
dissenters, but
I
from
didn't mean
what
to
I
imply
understand,
all. Yeah.
a lot of them decided not to speak because for some reason they were told before the meeting that you already had the four to move forward. I think that's why they're not speaking.
Who were they told by?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I was working on this until 4:59 before this meeting, so I'm not really sure. But I didn't mean to suggest that everyone was pro-housing. I'm just saying it's nice to see some pro. So as I was saying, I just want to share some thoughts.
Okay, all right, we're gonna have, everybody
Okay.
can.
For years, we've been working on affordable housing tools in the city. We've been in a housing crisis around affordability for at least 10 years, I believe. And, we have various tools already. Density bonuses, land use incentive grants that have been paused, low interest loans for developers, bond funding that we infuse into projects to bring down costs, land purchase partnerships, all types of tools. But it's still not achieving affordability at the rate that we need. And none of those tools have ever really been focused on increasing supply. And that is a concern for me. What we have here tonight is a policy, a program, an attempt to work on supply. And when I meet with large developments, as they bring us projects, I often hear, it might even be 100% of the time, that our review process as a city is cumbersome, painful, takes years, and often developers are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to get to the point where they come here and ask for approval, and then we don't grant it to them and we lose projects. That tells me that, similar to the great comments about the donut around the city, that we're out of whack. So I really want to appreciate staff's work on this and all of council and everybody that's been involved, volunteers, to get us to this point where we might actually make some progress here tonight, hopefully. I have some concerns about this specific tier. Notably, I'm uncomfortable with the baseline of 0 affordable units. Because if we're going to do developers the favor of bypassing the excruciating process of coming before us, then I think that we should get some affordability out of it. I also, much like some of the comments I heard, am concerned that tier 3 and 4, showing 300,000 and 350,000 square feet, is too high to allow in a buy right process that the state the city is in. For those reasons, I have drafted an alternative table and sent it to my colleagues and have Maggie ready to put it up. This is there are some slight changes here. I'll try to point them out for clarity because I know for many of you this will be the first time you've seen them. So a simple one is just removing the term baseline and calling the first line tier 1. So here we have 3 tiers total, no further tiers after 250,000 square feet. And tier 1 includes some affordability. I think this gets us closer to our supply goals while ensuring we get affordability within every project. I've done some analysis on the last 3 years of projects that have come to us, and when using this table, we achieve very close to the same affordability without having to leverage huge resources like bonds paid by taxpayers or incentives that lower our property tax income, making us have to raise property taxes on the rest of you. So there's a symbiotic nature here of increasing supply and requiring affordability along the way. I want to offer maybe council a moment there to have any questions or comments about this tier before I possibly make a motion on it. Any concerns?
This is for, just to be clear.
This is just
we
for
are
the first
looking
item.
at-
We're going to have 3 motions. This is specifically for the first item around the, yeah, you can see it's the thresholds along corridors. This is not citywide. This is just our corridors.
So, to Councilmember Roney's point, I think we were ready to come to the table and do the public benefits table and do the things that we asked, but it didn't feel like our other colleagues were really ready to see housing pass. And so we, really want to kind of honor and respect what you're saying about that baseline. Because after our conversation, I think what you're saying is completely valid. So we're removing that 0% affordability. And if they want to bypass coming to council, then they must include that affordability. When we talked about the 20 versus the 30 years, I think that's something that maybe we can talk about. I would also like to see 30 years worth of affordability. But again, there seemed to be some kind of thing about it passing unanimously with all of us collaborating together. And I don't know where that came from, because I think our job is to work together to move towards progress, to make sure that we have housing for our people. 82% of BIPOC folks in survey after survey say housing is their top priority, and we must deliver. We are making it way too hard for people to live and work and play in our city. And this is one way that we can, right now, build affordability into the process and get what we need and want. And also honor and respect our legacy neighborhoods and do exactly what they asked for, which was freeze their zoning in place until...
This doesn't do that.
Well, that would be illegal because that would be a downzoning, and by the General Assembly, we're not able to do that.
But also, it's not in neighborhoods, so.
And I'm really
It's
confused.
a commercial district, and it's already zoned for commercial. That's why it would be a downzoning
Yeah, I was just trying to clarify that.
So I definitely support removing the tier 4. I think that, the size of 2 Costco's bypassing council and just being developed somewhere gives me a little bit of heartburn. And as proposed as this, I would support this table.
Since you named me in that, and I appreciate that you're reflectively hearing me, could you add a little more clarity on when we had our conversation today, what you mean by it doesn't sound like our colleagues are ready to pass housing?
I think we were all ready to come to the table and get something that we all agreed on, but it seemed that, but the comment was made that, you think that you can make a unanimous vote out of this, and I think that we could have. I think that we could have all came to the table and gotten a collaborative effort and made something that we had a unanimous vote on.
May I interject for just a moment? I know that's between y'all. Correct me if I'm mistaken, but I remember that during the work session we were having just before this, there was a request to leave early so certain folks could talk about something that was coming forward for this meeting. Is this what that meeting was about? Or that
You mean
request
where
was
we
made?
stepped outside during our break?
Yeah, it was, remember, when it was, we'll finish.
You're
in a
stepping out in the
second.
middle of the budget work session.
It's not a great timing, but unfortunately, we got the data that we needed to do assessments on this tier last night.
Because these numbers actually fall into the thresholds that we've been approving the past 3 years. These are actually in line with what the developers were doing.
So
And
I don't know
we
what
didn't get that
conversations
data.
y'all had, but this is literally the first time I'm seeing this.
So I think it was passed to all the council
It's been
members.
worked on in the last 24 hours. At least I was working on it for the last 24 hours. And then send it to you each today, but.
I have a
Can I,
clarifying question
just
for
one
legal.
second. I'm feeling like I need to chair this meeting. So did you conclude your comments?
Yes.
Okay, please, Councilwoman Rowe.
So when I'm reviewing the staff documents around this, it says that we can move forward just like on the chessboard when you move a pawn forward, because these don't conflict with Senate Bill 382. If we try to come back, let's say in 2 years, and be like, oh my gosh, we should have a public benefits table to this. The way that Senate Bill 382 is right now, could we go back and add a public benefits table? Or does it change the rules for next door developers to have different regulations?
May I ask you a question, Kim?
Just to clarify, the public benefits table that applies to hotels says, okay, you're building a hotel, and if you want a by right process, you have to either pay into the reparations fund cash or pay into the housing trust fund cash.
Obviously, it wouldn't be the same.
So this is the equivalent of a public benefits table. This says if you want a by right process to build multifamily housing / apartments, you have to provide affordability depending on the level you're proposing. So this is a public benefits table in the context of apartments. I think that's really confusing when you say there's some kind of public benefits table we could do that we're not doing that relates to apartments.
And we actually added what you wanted.
The difference I'm hearing, I think, Kim.
I just wanted to, you asked Brad a question?
I asked Brad a question about Senate Bill 382. If we wanted to go back and change this later, is it moving backwards? Are we allowed to do that?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councilmember Roney. So first of all, you mentioned Senate Bill 382, and just for everyone listening, this was a piece of legislation passed very recently by the state legislature, which took away much of the authority of local governments to do what's called down zoning, okay? So any action that used to be able to take, which would limit, in many cases, the development capacity of a piece of property, is currently prohibited by this new legislation. So the question you're asking me is, after tonight, at a later date, if council were to add what you've titled a public benefits table, would that qualify as downzoning and therefore be prohibited? It depends to a degree. What I mean by that is the devil would be in the details of what sort of public benefits you would be offering, because if the proposal would be a requirement to add public benefits, that's probably not something that we could do already. If the local...
Say that, I'm sorry, could you please say that again?
Simply requiring public benefits outside of normal development considerations is probably already something we can't do in this state.
But voluntarily you can.
But as a voluntary program, as an incentive program, as you see here, where they're voluntarily agreeing to add a certain percentage of affordable housing, you get a reduced or a streamlined review process. If we were going to add additional incentives like that to make the ability to get that streamlined process harder, i.e. you've got to do more things to qualify for it, the best answer I can give you at this point is it's possible. And I say that unfortunately because this legislation is so new, we don't have enough detail and analysis yet to determine whether a voluntary incentive-based program would qualify as downzoning or not.
So thresholds up can't go thresholds down.
For now.
To add additional thresholds or make the thresholds higher might qualify as downzoning at this point. We simply don't know for sure yet, but it's a possibility.
Thank you.
Kim, if I may, I think what you and I share a concern for the community benefits table because it reflects more than simply affordable housing.
Correct.
And one of the concerns I want to highlight before I make a motion is that I am concerned that this table will not work in the River Arts District. Post-Helene, development there is going to be much more challenging to build safely, elevated, and I don't think that this is going to be achievable by them. I'm encouraging us about a year out from Helene, when we have new flood maps, to perhaps revisit that area with different changes, maybe even making it less affordability, layering in more sustainability to help them do some of those things that we see in the hotel community benifits. Because I think I understand.
We're talking about renewable energy readiness.
Right.
We're talking about
Green
stormwater
building,
mitigation,
solar,
green building,
all of it.
Multimodal transportation infrastructure, the commonly negotiated benefits that we currently use.
I agree, yes.
Are all gone.
Unfortunately,
they're gone.
Well, they're not. We're just not incentivizing them in this table.
So what would you
but
propose?
We haven't.
Okay, hold on. We do have, let's pause. So if an affordable housing developer wants to come to us, hopefully staff will bring back online the Luigi program soon. which does incentivize if people need funding under those bases. Well, it did. We'll see what the revised Luigi looks like. But there are other opportunities, I think, to get to those points.
And funding, right? We just passed an affordable housing bond. We now have DR money that may be applicable for affordable housing rebuilding. So there are opportunities to pair financing and incentives and cash for purchasing land to help aid in increasing affordability in these ranges. And for clarity, if a developer cannot fall into these tiers, they can still come back to us for a CZ process. And if they would like to receive any funding to help them buy the land or bring down affordability, they would have to come to us for that too, to get a low interest loan, et cetera. So this isn't the only way the projects would go through the city. If they can't fit into this tier, they're back in the CZ process that comes to us. So,
Are you about to make a motion?
go ahead.
If you want to make the motion, that's fine. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, go
if
ahead.
anybody else wants to. No,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay.
Unless-
Okay, this is a long one. It's going to take me a minute because it speaks to a changing tier and I have to highlight every change. Okay, I move to approve the proposed wording amendments to Chapter 7 of the Asheville Code of Ordinances with the following adjustments. 1, baseline tier of the affordability and development thresholds shall be removed. Tier 4 of the affordability and development thresholds table shall be removed. Tier 1 of affordability levels shall be changed to 5% at 80 AMI or 3% at 60 AMI. Tier 3 affordability levels shall be changed to 15% at 80 AMI or 8% at 60 AMI. The Level 3 thresholds for review shall be as followed. Tier 1, non-mixed use above 100,000 square feet, mixed use above 150,000 square feet. Tier 2, non-mixed use above 150,000 square feet, and mixed use above 200,000 square feet. Tier 3, non-mixed use above 200,000 square feet, and mixed use above 250,000 square feet. I find that the proposed amendments are reasonable, are in the public interest, are consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and meet the development needs of the community in that all the amendments will, 1, simplify the UDO ordinance, the Unified Development Ordinance, and allow for a broader range of allowable densities and compatible housing options. 2, reduce administrative barriers to housing development and diversification. And 3, encourage expedited development review for projects that incorporate affordable housing.
That we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Okay, council, does anybody, this is just on the first one of the 3. Does anybody want to say anything else before we vote on it? I do. I want to say that where's Rob Robinson? Because he's the guy that got us started on this conversation of YouTube fame. Remember him? He was the.
Oh, no, because parking requirements.
Okay, well, he started all this. Yeah.
So I will say one thing, Mayor.
I wanted to say, he
Oh.
started this by standing in
Yeah.
front of the Arby's on Tunnel Road and saying, why can't we make this Arby's into multifamily housing? And it was a very good point. And maybe Arby's is watching because now maybe they can turn that into multifamily housing if this passes.
You know, there is an additional side advantage I was realizing as listening to public comment. When we see the tax credit projects come, like when Mountain Housing builds something, it's an NCHFA project and it gets a tax credit award. That process has its own requirements that are pretty lengthy and include parking requirements, unfortunately. But in downtown, when an NCHFA application came to us, we were able to write to them and say, our own parking requirements are less than yours. Could you consider reducing yours so this project can save money? And they agreed. So it occurs to me that all of our corridors will now fall under that as well. We may be able to help even those who are achieving the greatest affordability, 100% of their project, bring their costs down too, which I think is a nice little side note.
I just want to say that when I first got on council, soon after I was elected, we had our missing middle housing study done. And something that I was really proud to join a group of electeds was that the folks who came before me had the foresight to not just do a study about housing. They did it alongside a study about displacement because we know that the risks of unbridled growth that isn't centered on our equity values has caused a lot of harm in the past. And I think that we can hold our values for equitable housing to make sure that our longtime residents, our legacy residents, still have a space in our community. And I'm intending to support this amendment, and with as much support for this amendment, I have support for making sure that our engagement with the legacy neighborhoods doesn't become lip service, that we get together tomorrow and talk about, okay, we just passed a map that shows our most vulnerable neighborhoods and our legacy neighborhoods, now what? And now what together? I think that what a timeline looks like can be complex to pull together, but I am supportive of us pursuing housing that can drive down housing costs, that can reduce urban sprawl in support of our climate goals, that can bring more homes to corridors that are walkable. And as with much fervor that I feel that, I also feel deep support of, and we need to get into those conversations to look at all of the recommendations from our displacement study, all of the tools, tactics, and ideas that our community leaders in those neighborhoods have to make sure that that is where we walk to next.
Okay, any, yes?
So, I think this is a step in the right direction. I know while running for office, I spoke very often about dense, diverse, and connected housing and building along these corridors where people have access to public transportation and can easier get to recreation, to work, and to school is a step in the right direction. And I am pleased that we were able to modify this.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. Anybody? Yes? No? Okay. You're smiling at me. I don't know. You want to? Okay. All right. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay. Thank you. The motion carries. All right. Now we have two more of these. Anybody? Did you change any of them? No.
No.
Okay. It's just as presented. Anybody ready to
Sure.
read? Okay.
This is A2, which is specific to parking. Let's see. I move to approve the proposed wording amendments to Chapter 7 of the Asheville Code of Ordinances and find that the proposed amendments are reasonable in the public interest, are consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and meet the development needs of the community, and that the amendment will, 1, help promote equity within the pre-application process of land development, 2, increase opportunities for constructive dialogue between residents and land developers, and 3, create a clear and well-documented process. Is that the right?
This is for parking?
That's the wrong one, isn't it?
Yeah, this is for parking.
You read the right motion? Did we
Yeah,
conclude
yeah,
that you
just
read?
didn't reference
Okay.
parking, but that's it.
Does anybody want to second the motion, please?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other things happening up here? Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All
Oh,
those
yay.
opposed, please raise your hand.
We have consensus on parking, y'all.
Let's not.
Okay,
rub
I'm
it
not
in.
going to jinx it.
Right.
Okay.
Let's
Well, we'll go
just-
quick. All right, I moved, this is A3, here we go.
Can reconsider.
Okay, I'm moving quick. A3, here we go. And I want to comment that whoever the staff was that did those, marked those drawings and stuff, did a great job. It really helped me understand visually what this was representing. So I move to approve the proposed wording amendments to Chapter 7 of the Asheville Code of Ordinances and find that the proposed amendments are reasonable, in the public interest, are consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and meet the development needs of the community, and that the amendment will, 1, provide added flexibility to encourage housing along commercial corridors, and 2, will simplify and improve the consistency of the zoning code to support all users.
All right, there's a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, anybody else? Anybody have any questions, comments? Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, motion carries 4-3. What?
That might be the most housing changes we've made in a meeting.
We shall see, we shall see. Well, thank you all. You're welcome to stay to the bloody end, but that does conclude our public hearings agenda, and we will move now into our general public comment, but maybe give a moment. Thank you. I think people just don't know what you're talking about.
Well, it just sounds like you're going.
One thing that on stage. Well, one of the things that, because they said. We didn't know we did until 4:07. Thank you all once again for coming. We're going to move on to general public comment. Folks who are signed up under general public comment, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please watch the lights on the lectern. But actually, everybody knows how to do this that's signed up already under general public comment. And the first person is Paul Howell. Mr. Howell, please come forward. Thank you. What? Maggie, Mr. Howell is waiting for your full attention.
Let it stay on red. Let it stay on red. Let it stay on red, Maggie. Let it stay on red. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, City Attorney, City Manager, Assistant City Manager, and the glue that holds everything together, Maggie. I got this divided into 3 parts, and I'm trying to make it quick so I can read it, so please don't nobody stop me or nothing. I am dismayed and disgusted that the residents of this city elected someone that's not only deceitful with them, yet also with the people they sit on council amongst. An entire year they knew about the previously rejected plan for the I-26 connector being implemented in the current proposal and said nothing about it to nobody. Straight to see. I'm appalled and repulsed that the residents of this city elected a two-faced, double-tongued speaking coward to council. I mean, for one to be all gung-ho in voting yay for the legacy neighborhoods, only to be the one to turn around and call for the previous vote to be voided once the so-called out-of-touch, confused legacy members left the chambers. He changed his vote to nay. How can we trust you when the proof is in the pudding? You'll say and do anything contrary to what you say and do. Cowardly. I'm terrified and distrusting that the council, with a great propensity for wasteful spending, is being gifted $250 million by HUD, where they was until Trump just said no, by HUD to assist in the rebirth of Asheville. To list the wasteful spending would take more than 3 minutes, so it's noted. But one major waste is the $5 million worth of scrap called electric buses sitting over there that nothing has been done with, can be done with. That's waste. Okay. I see infrastructure and affordable housing are amongst the areas being covered. I pray that affordable housing is built for everyone. Please don't quote no AMI mess, because we all know that's out of whack since Halloween. Please make sure the infrastructure includes the many streets we have with pothole obstacle courses tearing up people's cars and tires. We're not needing no new bike lanes, no more greenways, no more roundabouts. But many of our streets remain neglected 20, 30, and 40 years. Cosmetic dressing of this city for visitors doesn't remove the ugly neglect of it and its residents. We have to be the only city that's council looks out for the interests of outsiders and transplants more than they do for the residents and their constituents.
Thank you. Babette Mays.
Good evening to the mayor, vice mayor, and chairperson, all the people that I already know. First, I want to say that I have, as long as I've lived in Asheville, I've lived in a legacy neighborhood. Stumptown was taken. I live in Shiloh. My concern is with the fact that I live on a road where my neighbor, that's about this far from me, they have city water. We pay city and county taxes, but I have to use a septic tank. I know years ago it was supposed to be some money in a grant that we would be able to have the city water and sewer. We would not have to use septic, but that has never happened. It is discouraging to me when I know all the money is spent on so much other things and it's not been done for us. Because I think we deserve it after all this time. We can't afford, those of us that are stuck with this, we cannot afford to upgrade that system, to get rid of the septic, for them to close it off, to give us what we need as a sewer system. That's my first concern. My second concern is I go to church on Caribou Road, Rock Hill Missionary Baptist Church. There's a man that bought a house, and then he put a garage apartment behind it, and he put another one behind it. Now, it's so close to my church that when we're having services, we can actually hear his air conditioning unit or his heating system while we're in church service. My concern is now we have a problem. We were not even able to have church on Sunday because there's something wrong with the water system. There's a leak in a pipe that stretches from where our church is to where the house next to that is. So if you're gonna start to put in more houses with your infrastructure, if this is what you're going to do, at least be able to control our pipes, our water pipes, so that we won't have this, because that's an inconvenience to us, that we had to close down and not have church service, and we have to be the ones responsible for getting a plumbing system to work with our neighbors to be able to have that leak fixed. So I say to you, please, whenever you decide that you're going to move into that area, make sure that all the pieces to that puzzle are working together. And please see if you can find some grant money so we can come out of the septic system. Because I get tired of having to go to Walmart to get the stuff, the Rid-X or whatever it is, to put in there, because if you don't do it, eventually it's going to come up in your yard, in your toilet. But I pay city and county taxes. And so I think that's an inconvenience. And my last comment is, I was kind of disappointed, because I listened to you all take time to make comments with each other, and I thought that you all would know more about what was going on than to have to continue your comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would appreciate getting an update on that situation if it was promised but didn't go through. If that
yeah, if maybe someone could follow up with Ms. Mays to, because there were a number of sort of constituent issues going on there. We do have areas of the city that are still on sewer.
Are they paying the sewer fee?
No, they're,
Okay,
no, they don't
it's just
pay,
half the
they don't
bill.
pay
Okay.
MSD, but they're on,
Wow.
yeah, until MSD extends the line. That's a whole other issue.
We'll definitely follow up.
The next person signed up to speak is Nina Tovish.
Good evening, council members, mayor, and city staff. I'm here today with a slightly different message. I'm delighted to follow Ms. Bobette. Since we last met in this room, I woke up at 4 a.m. in the morning to the sound of rushing water. And I don't know about all of you, but having lived through Helene, the sound of rushing water at 4 a.m. in the morning is not a comforting sound. I looked out my bedroom window and I saw a waterfall of water down Center Street. I live on the corner of Center and Brookshire Streets. I went to look out on Brookshire, and Brookshire was completely flooded. I got on the phone to city water folk, got sent to their call center, I don't know where, and a report was taken. And a couple of hours later, our city folks showed up and started to do the repair. But I'm here to tell you that this was at least the 6th water main break that has been in my block in the last year. I went and looked at the city site about the priorities for what's getting fixed and so forth, and I see that there's going to be a new sewer line down London Road. That's great, I'm sure they need it. But over the last 2 or 3 years, we've had easily more than a dozen main breaks. And now it's just a patchwork of repairs down my road and then down Center Street. So I'm signing on that we really need these core repairs to be done in a way that keep it from happening over and over again. One little spot breaks, that gets fixed, that puts more pressure on the other areas that haven't been fixed yet, and then they break. And it's just, it's nuts. So please, let's make some kind of priority to do a comprehensive upgrade so that we aren't without water like we were during Helene, except very locally in our neighborhood where our sewers are a mess. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Okay, no complaining about the water rates for this next year then. Sonia Marcus. I assume Jade was taking notes about that one.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Sonia Marcus, and I live on Westwood Place. I've been in Asheville since 2013. And one of the earliest kind of public input processes that I was involved in when I came here was all of the incredible community mobilization around the redesign of the I-26 project. It was really kind of amazing to see all the people who had come together over decades, literally, to propose an alternative to what DOT was doing that actually better met the needs of our community and also conformed to whatever needs we had in terms of getting the traffic off of Patton Avenue. So I was really inspired by that. And right now, what I understand to be happening is essentially DOT going back on certain elements of that plan, and specifically the issue of whether I-26 is going to go over or under Patton Avenue, and eliminating an aspect of the plan which actually was like a really key kind of showpiece for the whole city. So a lot of people at this point don't even know about the various aspects of the alternative 4B plan that was proposed and ultimately adopted and agreed to by DOT. But the most kind of remarkable aspect of it, I think, in some ways, was the reconceptualization of Patton Avenue as a proper urban corridor that would be suitable for people who are walking and biking, and the bridge would be attractive, vegetation added, and something that would really become an amenity to the city, which is now a kind of just an eyesore and kind of a negative aspect for those of us who live right near it, which I do. So I'm very concerned about the process that DOT is using in this case. I don't think there's been, they haven't conformed to the laws that they have to around notifying us about potential impacts. They haven't gone through a process of requesting review of those impacts. They've simply pushed this change through, and I don't think it's something we should go along with. I think it's too much to sacrifice this vision of what Patton Avenue could be just because DOT says that's not something that they want to do anymore. So I know not all of you are directly involved in that process, but I know all of you have some hands in these conversations, and I'm just going to urge you to join us in putting pressure on DOT to reveal the information that informed this change. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony Mejia.
City Council, Mayor. I wasn't here. That was unfortunate. I wasn't here at the last meeting. I was celebrating my 8th year anniversary. I'd still like to live my life outside of this place. I brought with me, though I wish I could show it, several emails from our representative, Chuck Edwards. They are emails that he sent out to people signed up to his newsletter. And in short, they detail, in many instances, cases in which he plans, supports things like Secure Border Act, things like implementing military training, DoD department facilities in places like Western North Carolina because, quote, it is much like our adversaries' environment, including China. many cases about illegal immigrants. One, I'm saying 9 million illegal immigrant encounters, like where animals. There was an email where he had to debunk his own conspiracy theories that his party was saying that FEMA was stealing aid and giving it to illegal immigrants. Overall, I'm not sure I'll show. I wanted to show this picture from Mayor Mannheim's personal Instagram thanking and gifting our Representative Chuck Edwards. I know this might seem like an attack, but I do understand how the politics works. There's a man with power, there's a man with resources, and right now he holds power over us. We need federal aid, we need help. I say I understand, and I do, but I really, really want to put this forward. I want you guys, I want people in Asheville to understand help isn't coming. He doesn't care. They don't care. They have a political party where at worst it is advantageous to use us, immigrants, the working class, poor people, transgender people, as enemies, and as best treats them with apathy so people can just infer he doesn't care. This is one example. Our presidency is holding federal aid as blackmail for those states who don't fall in line with his immigration policies. We had a horrific climate disaster here. There was a hurricane in the mountains. Do you think it won't happen again? Do you think there won't be more heartbreak? Do you think more will happen? Do you think they won't tighten their vice? Because they will. Help isn't coming. The federal money will stop. The supplies will stop. The pretext of helping and securing our borders will stop when they start taking other people. And then the only people you have to rely on is us. We have been telling you the way forward to fix our housing, our people, to protect ourselves, invest in us, in your communities. You have a workforce here willing to work, to help, to recover, to build. You have resource, you have power. I'm asking you, Mayor, to do the same thing I'm doing now because I don't know how to do your job. I don't know what ordinances you need to pass to fix things, to change things,
Thank you.
to do things.
Thank you.
I'm asking you to speak out like I do.
Thank
because
you.
nobody in history
Thank
has
you.
ever gone quietly.
Thank you. Renee White.
Good evening, Council. To Deborah Campbell, our City Manager, to Esther, our Mayor, and to the other council members. As you all know, I am Renee White, President of the East End Valley Street Neighborhood Association. And I came here tonight just to say this. And I'm not appalled, I guess I'm not surprised, because I don't see a council as a whole that supports our black neighborhoods. I'm gonna take legacy out. I'm gonna say our black neighborhoods. Legacy would include our Emmer neighborhood. But we, every time we turn around, we don't have a council, for the most part, that comes to our neighborhoods and asks us what we like to see, what we would like to have done. It's only a very select few until it's election time. And when election time comes up, we have council members who come out, who are just grinning at us, who's working in our neighborhoods, who's doing all kind of stuff so you can get our vote. Then once you get the vote, you turn around and turncoat on the people who we hold you accountable for what you do. And then you turn around and turncoat the ones who supported you and got you in office. I think it's awful. I think it's horrible. I think that it causes a divide between our city government and our neighborhoods, and it's an absolute shame. I think it's a travesty the way that our black neighborhoods have to come up here and fight for every single thing that we need and every single thing that we want. It's obvious the travesty that we're going through anyway, just by being in those neighborhoods. We don't get the same opportunities. We don't get the same treatment as Merriman Avenue, Montford Avenue, Charlotte Street, anywhere where there's a large population of white people who are living in neighborhoods. They don't have to go through as much as we do. It's awful. And I'm really appalled at the council members who have turned their backs on our neighborhoods, and we're standing here once again addressing you with these issues, and you know it's a concern in our neighborhoods. We're already about to be taxed out just by the homes that are being built and people in our neighborhoods can't afford. Where do you think we're gonna go when we're taxed out because you're allowing these big homes to be built for $600,000, raising the taxes of everybody in our neighborhoods, I guess we'll be with the homeless people too. I'm just appalled at some of the members of this council. Thank you.
Thank you. Shaniqua Samuel.
Greetings. I am Shaniqua Samuel, the Shiloh Community Association's first employee. Our association is 25 years old this year, but it has roots since our displacement from the current George Vanderbilt Biltmore estate as far back as the late 1800s, where we first owned land, homes, a church, and a school. We continue to thrive today as a legacy neighborhood, providing enrichment programs and opportunities for the community to remain just that, a community. Over the years, we noticed that the city of Asheville allows developers to encroach on our community, furthering displacement, and we were rezoned and called an opportunity zone, which led to a high rate of gentrification. When I was a little girl, over 30 years ago, my neighbors represented culture and had respect for each other. 75% of us, or 75% or so of us, were homeowners of color. Now, because of the growing influx of tourists and the rezoning, we have a target that can be removed with the city on our side, offering city protection. Please don't change the business corridor zoning, carve us out. I mean the transit commercial corridor zoning. Please ensure that new transplants have to go through City Council and that City Council remains abreast of our well thought out neighborhood plan approved by the city in 2010.
Thank you. Andrea Golden.
Good evening, Council. I do want to start by saying that Emma Neighborhood thanks you for your supportive carve-outs for the flag lots and cottages, but are confused and disappointed with your lack of decision to have the same consideration around the commercial corridor. It was also painful and disappointing that our communication with you around this issue was not communicated in the room. The Emma community deeply understands the need for more housing. We've spent the past several years learning to develop our own housing. We've successfully created the community infrastructure needed to purchase 4 mobile home parks and convert them into permanently affordable resident-owned communities. We recently purchased a nearly 9-acre parcel to develop nearly 40 units of permanently affordable housing, which will begin construction on this summer. We provided home repair to over 100 units in our neighborhood, preventing displacement and keeping low-income and legacy residents in place. We are extremely proud of this work and believe it's a testament to our neighborhood's commitment to protect existing housing and create new housing. At the same time, we've seen waves of housing development in our neighborhood with no consideration to our neighborhood plan, historical, or current character and context. One of the only tools that we have as a community to ensure that our community is taken into account during the process that these new developments go through was through our ability to engage with you as City Council. You just took away our community's voice to inform housing that is built within our neighborhood maps. The levels of affordability that were approved do not take into account our neighborhood AMI, which is completely different than the city level AMI. It does not provide meaningful levels of affordability to our neighborhood. I believe that we had all learned the lessons acutely of what happens when community voices are excluded from the conversation. There are unintended permanent consequences in our communities that we will have to live with. Thank you.
Thank you. Norma Baines.
Good evening to the mayor and the council and members of the, members of the city government. My name is Norma Banks. I'm a resident of the Shallow Community Association, and I'm also the liaison. I have some pictures up here because Bobette Mays was just here to show you how the development in Shallow is next to Rock Hill Missionary Baptist Church. If you see how they are put in there, one of the first pictures, that's the front of it. And these houses are in the back of it. And the houses, one house is sitting because they couldn't get it to face the street, so they put it on the side, okay? So I don't think anybody would like that in their neighborhood. I know we didn't want that in our neighborhood. And we're hoping that we asked the developers to come to our association and talk to us. And we have our 2025 plan here. And this 25 plan was adopted in 2010. And guess who helped us to do it? The city of Asheville. So we expected you to help us to implement it also. So there are some things about the overlays in here, the core and the corners and things. Please take that into consideration because you approved it in 2010. So we expect you to implement it with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sophie Dixon.
Good evening, council. I said I wasn't gonna say anything, but I couldn't sit there. Most of you, I'm so much older than you, you maybe don't even know what I'm talking about. But some of you do, and if you don't remember, if you don't know, go look it up. Urban renewal. Came to us like it was gonna be the best thing that ever happened to folks, especially you black folks. And what happened? I was born and raised in Stumptown, urban and in the Hill Street area. Guess what? Urban renewal tore it up. 240 came across there, took all the houses out, and who was gonna say something about it? Nobody. Yeah, I'm old, but I remember. And because I'm old, it doesn't mean that I don't know what I'm talking about. And I know what I'm talking about because I lived it. And so here we are back again. Why? It just doesn't make any sense. And I guess it's probably the last time because I'm not ever coming back again. It seems like it's been a waste of my time and I don't have a lot of it left. But I am sad that this is what we have come to. And don't look at us, oh, y'all black, y'all old. We are people and we have the same needs. We hurt just like everybody else. If you cut me, I bleed red. Cut you, you bleed red. So that's not what it's about. We know what it's about. And so we just want to know to let you know that we're still here and we're not going anywhere until the Lord asks us to come.
Thank you. Council, that is the last person signed up to speak under public comment. So that concludes our public comment. We do not have a closed session.
I'd like to make just a couple comments. If folks are about to leave, maybe it's too late. To Renee, I wanted to just mention that the reason I delayed and held my ground on not supporting the flag lots and cottages until we had the maps is because of what you spoke about. I loved hearing your idea just there at the podium just now saying the houses around us are being built too big. And what I hope comes from the upcoming engagement, as long as it takes and is needed, is ideas like that so that we can say, you know what, maybe this neighborhood doesn't need houses over 3,000 square feet anymore, and we could stop it. You know, those are the kind of ideas I'm hoping will come from the engagement process. And I'm sorry if it felt like I didn't hear you and your needs and your requests, but my hope is that some of those things will come together for the benefit of the neighborhood. Also to Ms. Mays and Ms. Dixon, you mentioned Stumptown, both of you. And earlier when we were talking about those tiers and the big square footage and how much you could build and how big should be allowed, I drafted those tiers specifically with Stumptown in mind because there is a project coming to us that is enormous, and it's on Hill Street. And if those tiers weren't changes, it might not have come to us, and now it will. So I know it's not perfect, and I know there's legacies of impact that need to be corrected, but I just wanted you to know that I am considering some of these things. And I appreciate your input.
All right, thank you all. So we are adjourned at the moment.